The blade wasn't in my back. It was in my gut, and the hand twisting it was the one I'd shaken in partnership just that morning. He stood on that stage, under the warm glow of the spotlights, bathed in the applause that was meant for me, and smiled a smile that didn't reach his dead, empty eyes. Every clap from the audience was a shovel of dirt on the grave of my career, each cheer another nail in my professional coffin. The project, my beautiful, intricate creation, was now a monster wearing his face, and I was just the ghost in its code. He had gutted my soul for a promotion, and as they chanted his name, I felt the cold, hard certainty of a promise taking root in the ashes of my confidence. He had no idea who he'd just buried, but he would. Oh, he would learn. It started, as most corporate tragedies do, with a lie. The lie was named Project Chimera, though that was my name for it, a secret designation for the algorithm I had spent 18 months of my life birthing. To the rest of the world, to the suits at OmniCorp, it was simply the Q3 Synergy Initiative, a name so profoundly meaningless it could only have been conceived by my manager, Mark Renshaw. Mark was a masterpiece of corporate evolution. He had the charisma of a game show host, the vocabulary of a buzzword thesaurus, and the technical aptitude of a garden gnome. He couldn't write a line of code, but he could circle back and leverage core competencies with an artistry that left executives nodding in slack-jawed admiration. He managed people the way a child plays with action figures, mashing them together and creating narratives of epic success that had no basis in reality. I was his star action figure, the one with all the cool accessories, and he was about to put on the show of his life. For a year and a half, I had lived in the dim glow of my dual monitors. My diet consisted of lukewarm coffee and the stale crackers from the vending machine. My social life had withered into a collection of apologetic, can't-make-it texts, but it was all worth it. Chimera was more than just code. It was a revolution. It was a predictive analytics engine that could process unstructured data with an elegance and speed that was, without exaggeration, a decade ahead of its time. It could forecast market trends not in days or hours, but in minutes. It was my symphony, every line of code a perfectly placed note in a complex, harmonious whole. I had kept Mark updated, of course. I sent him weekly progress reports, which I'm certain he never read beyond the subject line. I sat through his excruciating one-on-ones where he'd offer blue-sky thinking like, "What if we made the data more impactful?" I'd nod, smile, and say, "I'll look into that, Mark," before returning to my desk to continue the actual work. He was a necessary annoyance, the gatekeeper to the resources I needed. I was naive. I thought the work would speak for itself. The day of the big presentation to the board, the one that would determine the recipient of the new Senior Vice President of Innovation role, I walked in feeling a tremor of nervous excitement. This was it. This was the moment the 18 months of sacrifice would pay off. I had my presentation loaded, my speaker notes memorized. Mark met me at the door to the boardroom, his face a mask of counterfeit concern. "Sarah, thank God you're here," he said, adjusting the knot of his ridiculously expensive silk tie. "Listen, there's been a slight change of plans. The board wants a higher-level overview. More strategic, less technical." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart starting to thrum a worried rhythm against my ribs. "The technical details are the whole point. That's the innovation." I know," he said, patting my shoulder with a proprietary air. "And your work has been fantastic, really stellar. But you know how these guys are. They get bogged down in the weeds. So I took the liberty of streamlining your deck. I'll handle the presentation from here. You just sit back and be ready to answer any deep dive questions they might have." He was already moving toward the podium, my presentation clicker in his hand. My slides were on the main screen, but they were different. The sleek, data-rich graphs were gone, replaced by chunky, cartoonish arrows and clip art light bulbs. My carefully worded explanations had been supplanted by vapid, high-level bullet points filled with words like paradigm, optimization, and synergy. And at the bottom of the title slide, where my name should have been, was his, Mark Ray. Shaw, project lead. I stood there, frozen, a statue of disbelief. It was happening too fast. The room was full, the board members were settling in, and Mark was tapping the microphone. He looked at me, gave me a little wink, and began to speak. He spoke about his vision. He talked about the long nights he spent wrestling with complex data models. He explained, in the most ludicrously simplistic terms, how he conceived of a way to disrupt the data space. He was reciting the executive summary I had written, but he delivered it with a theatrical flourish, as if the words were being faux. Arjed in the furnace of his own intellect. He was a conductor waving a baton, pretending to create the music that was pouring from the orchestra behind him. The board was eating it up. They nodded. They murmured appreciatively. When one of them asked a vaguely technical question about the algorithm's learning rate, Mark just smiled his million-dollar smile and said, "That's a great question for the tactical level. What we're focused on here is the strategic unlock." He then gestured vaguely in my direction. Sarah, from my team, handled some of the back-end implementation. She can speak to that if we want to get into the nitty-gritty later. Some of the back-end implementation. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't the architect, I was a bricklayer. I wasn't the composer, I was a page-turner. In that moment, in a room full of the most powerful people in the company, I had been rendered invisible. I had been erased. The presentation ended with a thunderous round of applause. The CEO, a man named Caldwell who prided himself on spotting next-generation talent, stood up and shook Mark's hand with vigor. "Incredible, Mark. This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need." "This is innovation," Mark beamed, a humble conqueror. "Thank you, sir. It was a team effort." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost admirable. I slipped out of the room before anyone could speak to me. I made it to the sterile solitude of the women's restroom, locked myself in a stall, and slid down the cool metal wall to the floor. The sound of the applause was still ringing in my ears, a cruel, mocking echo. I didn't cry. I was too far gone for tears. I just sat there, hollowed out, a ghost in my own machine. The official announcement came the next day. Mark Renshaw was promoted to Senior VP of Innovation. His first act in his new role was to restructure the department for optimal efficiency. I was reassigned. My new project was legacy systems maintenance for the Midwestern Sales Division. It was a corporate oubliette, a place where careers went to die. My access to the Chimera project was revoked. The public downfall was a quiet, brutal affair. It wasn't a firing squad. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. In meetings, people's eyes would flicker to me for a moment before darting away, their faces a mixture of pity and discomfort. I was a pariah, a walking cautionary tale about what happens when you don't play the game. Colleagues who once stopped by my desk to chat about code or ask for advice now gave me a wide berth in the hallway. I was a stain on the corporate carpet that everyone was trying very hard to ignore. Mark, meanwhile, was a conquering hero. He was featured in the company newsletter, his airbrushed photo smiling out from under the headline, "The Man Reinventing OmniCorp's Future." He did interviews for industry blogs. He talked about his algorithm with a fluency that was terrifying, using the analogies and metaphors I had created to explain it to him. The isolation was absolute. I'd go home to my sterile apartment, and the silence would be deafening. The joy I once found in coding, in solving complex problems, had curdled into ash. I'd open my laptop, stare at a blank development environment, and feel nothing but a vast, empty dread. The voice in my head, the one that used to hum with ideas, now just whispered poison. "You let this happen. You weren't smart enough to see it coming. You weren't bold enough to stop it. You deserved it." My family tried to be supportive, but their attempts were clumsy. "Maybe it's for the best, honey," my mother said over the phone. "That other project sounded so stressful. Now you can have a better work-life balance." They didn't understand. It wasn't about stress. It was about creation. It was about a part of my soul that had been ripped out and put on display in a museum under another artist's name. For weeks, I was adrift in a sea of self-blame and despair. I was just going through the motions, a ghost haunting a cubicle farm. I logged in, stared at COBOL code from the 1980s, and logged out. The fire in my mind had been extinguished, leaving behind nothing but cold, gray embers. I was broken. I thought I would stay that way forever. But even in the deepest darkness, A single, unexpected spark can ignite a wildfire. The spark, for me, arrived in the form of a one-line email from an address I didn't recognize. From Alistair, Finch at Ret, Omnicorp, com subject. Old systems, the body of the email contained a single, cryptic sentence. They never changed the locks on the back doors. I stared at it for a long time. Alistair Finch. The name tickled a distant memory. He was the head of IT security, a grizzled, cynical old man who had retired a year or so ago. He was a legend, a grumpy oracle who spoke in muttered warnings and had seen generations of ambitious climbers like Mark come and go. I remembered him once, in the cafeteria, watching Mark hold court with a table of sycophants. Alistair had caught my eye and given a barely perceptible shake of his head, a silent warning I had been too naive to understand. Backdoors. It was a shot in the dark, a wild guess, but I had nothing left to lose. I dug through my old project files, searching for anything related to system architecture from Alistair's tenure. Deep in a forgotten folder of network diagrams, I found it. A system administration protocol he had designed called Janus. It was an old, supposedly decommissioned diagnostics tool. It was also, I realized with a jolt of electricity, a master key. It was a backdoor into the entire Omnicorp network, built by a man who didn't trust anyone and who believed in having an ace up his sleeve. And as he said, they never changed the locks. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't stare at a blank screen. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not with the methodical pace of creation, but with the frantic, focused energy of a safecracker. Within an hour, I was in. I had God-level access to everything. I looked at Chimera's code, my code. It was like seeing a beloved child who had been kidnapped and mistreated. Mark, in his infinite wisdom, had put his new team, a group of equally inept but charismatic yes-men, in charge of it. They were mangling it. They had introduced clumsy patches and inefficient queries, trying to add features they didn't understand. The beautiful, elegant system was becoming bloated and unstable. The raw performance data, hidden from the glossy reports Mark was showing the board, told the real story. The project was failing. A plan began to form, a cold, crystalline structure of logic and vengeance. Mark had a tell, a crutch he leaned on in every single presentation. It was his favorite piece of corporate gibberish, a phrase he used to sound profound when he had absolutely nothing to say. It's time to activate our synergistic potential. He said it in the presentation where he stole my work. He said it in every all-hands meeting. It was his trademark, his brand of brilliant stupidity. It would be his undoing. It would be my trigger. I started to build my logic bomb. It wouldn't be a crude weapon of destruction. Crashing the system was too simple, too barbaric. This would be a weapon of truth. When the trigger phrase was spoken into a networked microphone in the main auditorium, and I knew Mark, he loved to pace the stage with a live mic, it wouldn't cause a system failure. It would execute a single, devastating command. It would hijack the presentation display, kill the sanitized PowerPoint slides, and project the raw, unvarnished, real-time data from Chimera's backend directly onto the main screen for the whole world to see. All the error logs, all the failing queries, all the plummeting performance metrics. And at the very end of the data stream, after a 5-second delay, one final line of text would burn itself onto the screen. Original algorithm authored by Sarah Jenkins. The planning brought me back to life. The fog of depression began to lift, replaced by a sharp, invigorating clarity. My narrative voice, which had been a chorus of doubt and pain, was changing. It was becoming sarcastic, calculating. I started testing the waters. I found a minor, untraceable bug in Mark's calendar software and triggered it an hour before a big meeting, causing all his appointments for the day to be deleted. I watched through the network cameras as he flailed, sweating and panicked, unable to function without his digital schedule. It was a petty, beautiful thing. It felt like breathing again. But just as my confidence began to return, the antagonist made his countermove. I got a meeting request from HR. It was a performance review. Mark was there, his face a mask of deep, insincere concern. He talked about my disengagement. He mentioned my lack of proactive communication on the legacy systems project. He was building a file. He was laying the groundwork to fire me. The idiot was so insecure in his new position, so terrified of being exposed, that his only solution was to get rid of the one person who knew the truth. The clock was ticking. The all-hands shareholder presentation was in 2 weeks. It was my only shot. It was around this time that Ben, a junior coder I had mentored before my fall from grace, started stopping by my desk. He was sweet, earnest, and full of admiration for my past work. "It's so unfair what happened, Sarah," he'd whisper, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "That legacy project is a waste of your talent." He offered to help, to run some diagnostics for me, to take some of the tedious work off my hands. For a moment, I was tempted to trust him. The loneliness was a heavy cloak, and the idea of an ally was a seductive one. But the new me, the one forged in betrayal, was cautious. I gave him a small, isolated task: to debug a piece of code on a sandbox server, a server I was monitoring closely. The next day, I checked the access logs. An hour after Ben finished his work, a connection was made from that server directly to Mark Renshaw's office terminal. The little traitor had been sent to spy on me. The confirmation didn't even hurt. It was just data. I used it. I started feeding Ben harmless but misleading information, little breadcrumbs about a personal project I was working on that was causing network slowdowns, creating a false trail for Mark to follow while I continued to build my weapon in T. He shadows. The second betrayal had inoculated me against misplaced trust. I was on my own, and that was a strength, not a weakness. The plan escalated. Using Alistair's backdoor, I embedded the logic bomb deep within the auditorium's AV control system, masking it as a routine firmware update. It was dormant, invisible, waiting for its cue. The tension was a high-wire act, a constant thrum of adrenaline under my skin. I was a ghost, pulling strings from the digital ether, preparing the stage for a grand finale. The day of the shareholder presentation arrived. It was the biggest event of the corporate year. The auditorium was packed with investors, analysts, and employees from every division. The CEO, Caldwell, sat in the front row, his face expectant. I wasn't in the room. I was at my desk in the forgotten corner of the office, watching the live stream on my monitor, my finger hovering over a kill switch in case something went wrong. My heart was a drum machine against my ribs. Mark took the stage to a round of polite applause. He looked immaculate in a tailored suit, the very picture of a confident tech visionary. He launched into his speech, a symphony of meaningless jargon. He talked about leveraging synergies, actualizing potential, and shifting paradigms. The glossy, fake slides he had prepared cycled behind him, showing upward-trending graphs that were pure fiction. He was building to his crescendo. I knew it was coming, my breath caught in my throat. "And so," he said, pausing for dramatic effect as he paced the stage, "as we look to the future, as we embrace the next generation of data-driven strategy, I say to all of you that it is now, more than ever, that we must. It's time to activate our synergistic potential." For a split second, nothing happened. A cold wave of panic washed over me. Did I miscalculate? Did they update the system? Then the main screen behind Mark flickered. His PowerPoint slide vanished, replaced by a cascade of scrolling green and red text. It was the raw output from Chimera's diagnostic log. It was a river of failure. Query TIMUT. Error, data mismatch. Performance degradation, 87%. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Mark stopped talking. He turned and stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He tapped his microphone. We seem to be having a slight technical glitch here," he stammered, his confident facade beginning to crack. But the data kept scrolling, an undeniable, relentless torrent of truth. The audience was silent now, transfixed. They could see the project's real-time status, the disaster that was unfolding behind the curtain of Mark's lies. Caldwell in the front row had gone rigid, his face darkening like a storm cloud. Mark was frantically gesturing to the tech crew in the back, but my code had locked them out. He was alone up there, exposed. Then the scrolling stopped. The screen went black for 5 agonizing seconds. I counted each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the final words appeared in clean white sans serif font, filling the entire 40-foot screen. Original algorithm authored by Sarah Jenkins. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. It was a sound I would cherish for the rest of my life. All eyes swung from the screen to a sputtering, ashen-faced Mark. And then, as if by instinct, people started looking around, searching for the name on the screen. Mark completely imploded. "No, that's not true. She's lying. She sabotaged it. It was her. Check her machine." He shrieked into the microphone, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. Security was already moving toward the stage. As they flanked him, a figure stood up from the back of the auditorium. It was Alistair Finch. I had sent him an anonymous invitation, hoping he'd want to see the show. He walked calmly down the aisle toward the tech booth. "I can help with that," Alistair said, his gravelly voice cutting through the stunned silence. He addressed the CEO directly. "Mr. Caldwell, that isn't a virus, it's a feature. It's an old data integrity protocol I built into the system years ago. It's designed to trigger a raw data dump automatically if the presentation metrics deviate from the source logs by more than 20%. It's a failsafe against fraud." He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He had just handed me a suit of armor and a sword. He had not only confirmed the data was real, but had also made my attack look like a feature of the system's own immune response. It was the final, perfect, beautiful checkmate. Mark was escorted out, a babbling, defeated man. The fraud was undeniable, public, and spectacular. The next day, I was called into Caldwell's office. The CEO looked at me with a new, profound respect. "The board has reviewed the logs," he said, his voice clipped and serious. "Both the project logs and the presentation logs. Mark Renshaw's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. On behalf of Omni Corp, I want to offer you my sincerest apologies." He slid a folder across the vast mahogany desk toward me. "Project Chimera is yours again, of course, but we think you're destined for more than that. This is a proposal to fund and create a new, independent innovation division. A skunkworks team. No red tape, no oversight from marketing. Just you, a hand-picked team, and a mission to build the future. You would run it. Director level. Effective immediately." I opened the folder. The offer was real, the authority was real, the budget was staggering. I looked up at Caldwell, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled a genuine smile. "I accept." My liberation wasn't just in the promotion or the new title. It was in the walk I took from Caldwell's office to my new one, in a building on the far side of campus I hadn't even known existed. It was in the quiet hum of the high-end servers that awaited me. It was in the knowledge that I had faced the absolute bottom, the erasure of my very identity, and had clawed my way back not by being louder or more aggressive, but by being smarter. I had used the system against itself. The ghost in the code was finally at the helm, no longer a phantom, but the architect of her own future. I was free. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Which part of the journey did you connect with the most? Share your thoughts in the comments.